And we are joined in the studio by our very own rocket man this morning, engineer Salem Humaid Marri, Assistant Director General for Scientific and Technical Affairs at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre. Good morning to you.
Good morning, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. You're here to talk about a range of issues. If you've got any questions about the UAE space programme for engineer Salem Humaid Marri, do please let us know. But specifically, last week we were talking about the deal you've done with Mitsubishi. You've effectively bought a rocket launcher to send the UAE's Mars probe into space. That's my very simple summary of it. You could put it far more eloquently. So in your own words, just tell us that recent development, what it is you've done.
Definitely. I mean, looking at getting into space, so maybe the most difficult aspect of working in space is the access to space. So what we've done is basically secured our access into space, and obviously building the probe is what's going to be done here by our engineers. Getting that into space is a bit more difficult, and there's a commercial market which exists, and that's what we've done basically. We've bought a Mitsubishi H2A rocket. We will place the Mars probe in the top of that rocket. That rocket will then blast off from Tanegashima Space Center in Japan, and it will carry the probe on a journey of about 1 hour to get out of Earth's gravity. And once it gets into space, it basically will inject the probe on a trajectory towards Mars.
What does it cost, the rocket? We were speculating about this last week. Wikipedia has a list of the list prices of a lot of rockets, but not the Mitsubishi H2A. Can you tell us how much a rocket launcher costs?
I can't speak specifically about the cost because these are commercial deals. However, as you said, in Wikipedia you can go in, you can have a ballpark figure of what these rockets cost. And as you can see, it's not very cheap, of course.
Tens or hundreds of millions of US dollars.
So I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest with you, that you're not going to be sending people up. But I guess that probably Mars is a very long way, isn't it?
It takes you about 7 to 9 months to get there on the best of terms. So it's long, yes.
So this thing is going to go up to Mars, and then what?
Basically, once it gets into Mars, we will take an orbit around Mars. And the Hope Mars mission will be one of the first missions to give us a holistic view of or study of the Martian atmosphere. So we'll be able to look at the Martian atmosphere throughout the year and really define what happened to Mars, what happened to its atmosphere, and why the planet is in that status currently. And maybe that would, give us indications of our studies of here on Earth, things to avoid or things to look at, and what happened to Mars, and maybe how we can avoid similar things in Earth.
I actually had one of my apps on the iPad yesterday. A little note popped up to say it was this day in 1969 that a Mars probe left Earth's orbit to go up there. So we've been looking for a very long time at Mars. What are we looking to find?
I mean, well, if you look at from the early 60s, or late 60s and 70s, there was always a look at, curiosity of what's on Mars. What's there, because nothing had gone to Mars.
I think we were still looking for Martians in those days.
Probably. And, once they'd gotten there, there was always, follow the water. So they're looking at, was there water on Mars? Is there water on Mars? And obviously we've discovered that there was water. There were, rainstorms, etc., and canals. And there is currently ice on Mars. And now it's more of looking at, obviously there's many different studies, but what we're focusing on is on the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is what would keep the water in liquid form on Mars. And, that atmosphere is very thin compared to Earth's atmosphere. And, we're looking at why that happened.
Well, I guess also, we probably don't know enough about it. We're saying ice, which would be solidified H2O, but we don't even know really that that's what it is, do we?
Exactly, yeah. This is why you've got the JPL Mars laboratory, which is the rover which is on Mars, which has a lot of basically instruments which can dig into the rocks and sand and try and discover these things. There's one that's going in 2020 which will have a lot of instruments.
I think it's a really, really cool program, but there are people who are cynical, skeptical about these things, so I'm going to play the role of the cynic for a couple of minutes now and ask you some of the questions that people do ask about these programs. The first one is, how on earth can the UAE or Dubai launch a rocket? We don't have a legacy of knowledge in this area. The Russians do, the Americans do, and that's fine. But how on earth can the UAE, where do we get our expertise from? So where do you get your expertise from, and where does your team get its expertise from?
Well, I mean, we get this question quite a lot. So what we've done is basically we've built our expertise over the last 10 to 15 years. And, we've been around for quite a while. We've we went into a knowledge and technology transfer with South Korea for about 10 years, where we developed DubaiSat 1, DubaiSat 2, and now we've been able to develop KhalifaSat all on our own in the UAE. So this will be the first Emirati developed satellite on UAE soil. And that's basically part of our legacy. And we're transferring that to developing the probe itself. So we'll be developing the probe. However, obviously there are certain specific instruments that we might procure from international entities, etc. That will be, space is about international cooperation.
How about the people and the team? A related question will be, well, do we have the smart, qualified Emiratis capable of doing this? I mean, you are Exhibit A. You clearly are all of the above. But tell us about your background, how you develop your expertise at university and your work life, and some of the other people on your team.
Sure. Just to focus on the Emiratis, I mean, that's really the reason we have the Mohammed Barashi Space Center, and that's the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, is to focus on developing Emirati skills. Currently, we have about 150 Emiratis working at the center. Over 100 of them are engineers, and about 40% of them are female engineers. And the average age is around under 30 years old. So these are quite impressive figures, and this is really what we're trying to build up, that capability in terms of people.
So what is their background? I mean, those 100 engineers, 40 of which are female, where have they come from? I mean, presumably come from space organisations or had training with space organisations overseas somewhere. What's their background?
Their background is that they've studied engineering in universities here in the UAE. Majority of them have studied in universities in the UAE. We've then sent them to countries such as South Korea, when they've worked live on our programs, for 5 or 6 years. They've gained the skills. Keep in mind that, space is a form of engineering at the end of the day, but there's some specifics that are related to space. They learn those specifics, and then they go from there. Now we've got people from PhDs, we've got a huge percentage of master's degrees, and the majority of them are bachelors. So.
Well, I mean, Ras Al Khaimah was in the running a few years ago to be a spaceport for the Virgin Galactic program, and you said that you're launching in Japan. Why not do it here locally? I mean, it'd be wonderful to hear the words "Mirdif, we have liftoff."
Yeah, there's. It's a bit different when you look at the Virgin Galactic. That's more of you could say, an aircraft. It's going into suborbital flight. When we look at a rocket such as the H-2A, that rocket, the height is over 60 meters. So if you look at as a rocket, that is, a 6-7 story building. So the facilities that you require to launch such rockets are humongous and tremendous.
So
and
it makes more sense to go from a commercial launch site.
Definitely, yes, yeah.
The other skeptical question I have, and that any space program gets, is the Americans and the Russians had this 50 years ago. You can build an awful lot of schools and an awful lot of hospitals for the money and effort it takes to send a rocket into space. So how do you justify, what's the benefit to humanity, to society, of doing this, given that the cost is schools, hospitals, whatever it may be?
Well, it's been proven in the United States that for every dollar that NASA puts into space, $6 or $7 come back. So there's a publication that comes from the space industry, which is basically spin-offs. So the amount of spin-off technologies that we get from space is phenomenal. And if you look at them from the 60s all the way till today, there were things that, in your mobile phones, things as simple as Tang, the Tang juice, these have all come from the space industry. So even looking at solar panels, the development of solar panels, the development of materials that that go into smart buildings, the development of batteries, these are all space-related products. And without, the challenge of getting into space and managing space projects, they probably wouldn't have been created or wouldn't have been at this level by now.
I wondered why, was it John Glenn that was promoting Tang in the States?
Yes.
Yeah. Now I know why.
So you're not a spaceman. Any ambitions for you to go to space or for the UAE to send astronauts into space? I know Dana Al-Balushi, 9-year-old Emirati girl, went to NASA, was it late last year, to do some training there. So it's clearly people have thought about this. Where do we stand on that?
Well, me personally, I don't think I'll be going to space anytime soon. I love Earth, but I would believe that there will be an Emirati going to space probably in the near future. That's something that would probably, we'd be looking at.
Have you got someone in training at the moment?
Currently, no, we don't have anybody in training. But I think this is a program looking at, the last year, if you look at Year of Innovation, you look at the establishment of the UAE Space Agency, the renaming of the Mohammed Barashi Space Center, the UAE has a big push towards space, and I think, the next step would be sending a UAE astronaut.
For you, what personally? I mean, forget what the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre want, but for you personally, when you look at the stars and you look out there, apart from the Moon and the Mars, which are the two things that people say are most colonizable, if you like, what else attracts you out there? What would you like to know more about?
I mean, basically, what I like is if you look at space, the Voyager spacecrafts. They were launched in the 70s, and they've basically gone out of our solar system. And where they're going currently is what I'm interested in. What's there, and these are the only man-made objects that have gone that far. And if you look at the signal when it comes, one-way signal from those spacecraft takes about 18 to 20 hours. And that's one way, and then you got to send another signal to them for 20 hours. So
who knew there was internet out there in the first place?
Yes.
Sam writes in with a related question, saying, does the UAE have a plan to launch a probe to Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, for example? So these are the kind of frontiers that Sam's looking at, and I guess these are the ambitions you share.
I think there's no limit. I mean, what we're looking at currently is, we have firmly the next 3-4 years are planned out. We're going to another Earth science satellite with Khalifa in 2018, Earth observation. And then we're going to be launching the Mars 2020 probe, which is a big mission for the UAE. And I think after that, we'll look at what is needed, and we'll see where the vision of the leadership takes us, and definitely we'll have a challenging and a very unique mission for the world.
But what about perhaps commercializing this in some sense? I mean, I don't know, I'm fantasizing about a joint venture between yourselves and Jumeirah, the hotel group, and Emirates to send people to the moon. And yeah, that's science fiction, but just last week, Malcolm, you were talking about, was it the European Space Agency planning to set up a base on the moon within a decade or two? So it's how realistic are these things? Are they on your radar at all, or on your colleagues' radar at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre?
We're definitely looking at many different aspects. I mean, one of the things, there's obviously colonizing different planets and the moon that's of interest, but I think one thing that's of a big interest currently is the asteroid mining. So everybody's looking at, there's a lot of asteroids out there that would have rare earth and materials that we could potentially mine and bring back to Earth, and that would be a $1 trillion industry if it's successful.
And this is where we sort of get into the realm of Star Wars a little bit, because you mentioned they're colonizing, and when we look at the seabed, for instance, outside into international waters outside the jurisdiction of a particular country, 12 miles offshore, there is the law of the seabed. But what governs space? I mean, who determines who owns what? Is it first come, first served? Stick your flag in whatever you find and it's yours. I mean, are there laws that govern what you can do in space?
That's a great question. I think, if you look at the United Nations, they have the basically the Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space Affairs, and they are the ones that basically govern space. So there are a number of treaties, such as the Outer Space Treaty that was first signed in 1967, which basically says that anything else in space is nobody's ownership. So nobody owns outer space, and it's for humanity. And there's other treaties such as the Moon Treaty and etc., which govern the moon as a body and how you can utilize that. So there are treaties out there that are ratified by a majority of countries, and the UAE is one of those countries that's ratified them. And those treaties would basically govern those activities.
You mentioned asteroid mining there. Let me ask you a bit more about that. I've read about this, I've heard about this. How fast do asteroids travel?
Very fast. So I don't have the figures, but extremely fast.
Let's assume it's very, very fast. They're the Bugatti Veyron of space clutter. How on earth could you stop one, put a digger on there, dig out some plutonium and send it back? I mean, that does seem science fiction to me, but is it possible? Could it happen?
Well, I mean, let's look at what's happened. I mean, these asteroids are traveling at very high speeds, and I think the key here is obviously the orbit mechanics and the orbit dynamics. So if you're going to send an object to liaise with one of these asteroids, you have to get the orbits correct, and you have to get your calculations correct. So if we look at the Japanese, they've sent a probe called Hayabusa, which actually landed on an asteroid and got a piece of that asteroid back and brought it back to Earth successfully. So that's already been done. So if you've been able to do that, obviously what they brought back was a very small speck of sand. So if you've already been able to prove that you can do that, I think the sky's the limit on the next.
Well, in 1988, I wasn't posted to the moon, but I was posted to South Korea, and it felt a bit like the moon at the time. It was a very sort of unusual and new experience for me. And you've just spent sort of 3 years, I think, in South Korea as well. You're obviously far too valuable to send to the moon as well, or to outer space anyway. But you really got used to South Korea, and you actually like it now, and you like the food and everything.
Yes, I mean, it was a great experience for me personally and also for the team that we sent there. So we were around 20 to 25 Emiratis, spent a lot of time, between 1 and basically nearly 8 years there. I spent about 3 years, and the food is great, the people are great, we learned some of the language, and it was a great experience, learning that and also learning space.
Did you get used to the winter strength kimchi?
Oh, never. I still can't get used to that. And also their winters, it's from minus 20. In the summer, it's plus 35. It's difficult.
It's very hard indeed, isn't it? And you were actually not in Seoul as well. You were in Daejeon, down in the south as well.
Yeah, that was more difficult because it's less international, so more science.
Hence you needed the Korean.
Exactly, yes.
2 or 3 final questions we've had coming in. A lot of people labouring this point about, just explain again what are the benefits. The costs are enormous to this. Now, you did answer this question 10 or 15 minutes ago, but a number of SMSs since then. For example, my question for the engineer, what are the benefits for the younger generation of UAE people? And other questions about you can build a lot of schools and hospitals with this. So just re-articulate that response if you could.
Definitely. So, I mean, one thing is, space always inspires people. So when you look at space and going to space and working and discovering something that hasn't been discovered, that's inspirational. So inspiring the youth to look at space and saying, okay, how can I do that? That we'll encourage them to go into STEM education and to become
science, technology,
and engineering and mathematics. So they will go basically into those fields, and also looking specifically at the technology. I mean, as I mentioned, space is basically the cutting edge. So whatever's been developed for space is usually the first time that's been developed by humans. And then once you've proven that in space, in such a harsh environment as space, it spins off to something that we use on the ground, such as the advancement solar powers, batteries, and simple things like Tang.
It sounds at the moment as if the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre is a research organisation with the aim of putting this rocket up towards Mars. Is it always going to be that, or is it going to morph? Because obviously it can't close now, because you've got all those people with expertise that simply wouldn't find another job in the Emirates. So it has to keep going in some ways. What are the sort of more commercial opportunities for something like the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre?
Well, we focus on space. However, we do look at the overall science and technology area. So we do have other projects such as we're looking at smart homes. We're looking at things related to space, but from a commercial perspective. So looking at
more the materials aspect of it.
Yeah, we're looking at these aspects, but looking specifically at Khalifasat. So this is a project that will be taking images of Earth, and then we can then commercialize those images. So we use them currently for government departments, the RTA, the municipalities, etc. But we do sell those images internationally. So that's one revenue generating area that we can work on.
It is a fascinating conversation. You have arguably the coolest job in the world, and I'm really, really grateful to you for joining us this morning to share some of your stories. Engineer Salem Humaid Al-Marri, Assistant Director General for Scientific and Technical Affairs at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre. Shukran.
Thank you. Shukran.
Kamsahamnida.
Kamsahamnida.